Hello, and welcome to the Computing Conversations column. This column is from the February 2015 issue of IEEE Computer and is titled Guido van Rossum, The Early Years of Python. There is supporting video material for this column that you can find in the IEEE Computer Society YouTube channel or in the IEEE Digital Library. I'm the editor of the column, and I'm Charles Severance from the University of Michigan. Combining simplicity and ease of learning with powerful capabilities and strong performance, Python is one of the most popular programming languages in the world. Created by Guido van Rossum in 1989, Python is the leading application language in important emerging areas such as natural language processing and big data. It fills an important gap between high-level applications like spreadsheets and statistical analysis packages and systems-oriented languages like C, C++, and Java. In the late 1980s, Guido was working at CWI, a mathematical and computer science research center in Amsterdam, developing a distributed operating system called Amoeba. Amoeba intended to make a network of computers appear as a single computer using a distributed kernel.
Because the file system model on Amoeba was so very different, we couldn't take an existing suite of Unix utilities. And so we wanted it to be self-hosting. And in order to do that, we realized we needed a large amount of user-level sort of applications, utilities, tools, whatever you call it, from an editor to a mail program, to a login utility and a backup tool. And one of the things I realized as we had a small team of people sort of working on those things, that it was very slow going writing all that stuff in C. And it wasn't particularly interesting or sort of novel or difficult, and often we also didn't really care how fast the code ran.
Guido wondered if there might be a quicker way to get all of the OS utilities built.
I had this idea in my head that given how much time we had available for our project, I could actually build a whole new language, design and implement it from scratch, and start using it to implement our suite of tools and still be ahead of the game compared to a situation where we would just have sort of clunked on writing the things we wanted to write in C.
For an earlier project, Guido had worked on a language called ABC.
There was this ABC language that I had in the back of my mind that would be a much better language to write a whole bunch of utility application tools for Amoeba. Except that ABC was so high and abstract that it wasn't a good language to talk to servers and file systems and processes, and it's sort of the whole operating system thing was abstracted away from ABC. It was almost something like I don't know, in an alternate universe, ABC could have become the language of spreadsheets. It was very good for talking about a user's data and doing all sorts of clever stuff with that data. And it did that using very sort of general all-purpose data structures like lists and dictionaries. And of course it had very nice code structuring devices like a small number of simple statements that could be combined in any way you wanted to.
Over a long holiday break in December 1989, Guido started developing an ABC-like language that could talk to the OS and would be suitable for quickly developing the OS utilities for Amoeba. He named this nascent project Python, taking inspiration from Monty Python's Flying Circus television program. After the holiday break, he continued to evolve the new language in his spare time.
For 3 months, I did my day job, and at night and whenever I got a chance, I kept working on Python. I believe that within 3 months I was to the point where I could tell people, look, here, this is what I built. And it had an interactive interpreter loop. So the first demos were all, let's assign an expression to a variable and print it back. And let's define a small function and call it. and let's put some things in an array and iterate over the array.
Though Python wasn't yet ready to be used to develop Amoeba OS utilities, the language was very appealing for programmers who were tired of writing C programs or Unix shell programs for various tasks.
I don't exactly know sort of how fast this happened, but certainly my two office mates were almost instantly taken with it and started helping out. And they and a few others within the institute were very excited about this thing that I'd built, and started sort of course, we didn't instantly use it on Amoeba because it wasn't mature enough to actually write the Amoeba utilities that we wanted. But it was already instantly useful enough for to run on our Unix system. People within CWI, even outside my own department, started using it and recognizing that it was fun and productive to use, and they used it for small scripts.
After a year of development and use within CWI, Guido and his colleagues decided that Python might have a broader use, and so decided to release it as free software. This was before the term open source was coined, so they simply looked to the MIT X11 license as an example of how to release free software. But they needed permission from CWI management to release the product. Guido's manager sent him to the Legal Affairs Department.
It turned out to be very simple to get management to sign off on this release. That was an incredibly lucky stroke. I asked my manager's manager, what shall we do about this? And he said, oh, you got to talk to this and this person in the administrative branch of the institute. She was like in charge of all legal affairs, I believe. And I said, well, I have written this source code and I would like to release that, and I have sort of made up a license that's like identical to the MIT license. I could say MIT releases software under exactly this license, and we just put like the formal name of our institute in there instead of the regions of the institute. She asked me some questions like, did someone pay for this to be developed? And my answer was no. I started this all in my own time, and it was for this research project. That's sort of, my manager is fine with it. And so she said, sure, go ahead, and we did it.
The first version of Python came out in February 1991 and was distributed using the alt.sources newsgroup on Usenet.
I immediately started getting useful, positive feedback from, well, initially just from random people who picked up free software from Usenet. And we quickly sort of got into a routine of doing new Python releases. And every time, I mean, there were the obvious improvements to the language and the library and bug fixes. A very important category of things that were often contributed were ports or porting fixes, where people had different architectures, different compilers. The Unix world was much less homogeneous at the time. There were lots of small Unix vendors that had their own compilers or their own hardware, all sorts of things.
From the initial release of Python through the early 1990s, the size of the Python community grew and numerous organizations started depending on the language. With broadening adoption, there was concern amongst users that Guido might get run over by a bus. Some of the adopters were U.S. government agencies that wanted to help grow and stabilize the Python community.
Then came the invitation to come to the United States for a couple months from NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology. So I spent 2 months there. We organized the first Python workshop, which was hosted by NIST. Through that Python workshop, I met people who offered me a job, and from 95, I went back to the Netherlands for a few months, and then from 95 to 2000, I worked in the US, in Northern Virginia, at CNRI.
Now Guido could focus on building Python and evolving the user community with solid support from CNRI. During the late 1990s, Python moved through a series of 1.x releases.
And so there we worked through a lot of growth of the community and the infrastructure. We created the Python website. I got in touch with a bunch of people who are still active in the Python community, like Barry Warsaw. I think when I started there, Python 1.3 was about to be released. And then while I was there, we released several subsequent versions leading up to 1.5.2, which for some reason 1.5.0 was nothing, but 1.5.2 remained that sort of the standard, the gold standard of Python for a very long time afterwards.
The growth of the Python community from its creation in December 1989 and the maturation of Python 1.x in the late 1990s laid the groundwork for the even broader expansion of Python 2 and now Python 3. It's an excellent example of organizations like CWI, NIST, and CNRI making investments in an open source commons, leading to significant positive value in computing. This column is from the February 2015 issue of IEEE Computer and is titled Guido van Rossum, The Early Years of Python. There is supporting video material for this column that you can find in the IEEE Computer Society YouTube channel or in the IEEE Digital Library. I'm the editor of the column, and I'm Charles Severance from the University of Michigan.